Hey, Charlie, have you heard that 7 in 10 early career job seekers are being rejected from entry-level jobs over lack of experience?
What the F? Jeez, man. Then how in the world can entry-level worker gain experience if they're not given an opportunity to gain experience? Maybe we shouldn't say entry-level anymore.
Yeah, well, among current and recent college graduates, there's more than a modicum of concern about this trend. Actually, it's more like a big what the F?
Way to go with saying what the F, Professor James. I think you should be the official what the F sayer from now on. Welcome to JobReady podcast. I am Charlie, the entrepreneur.
And I'm Jeff, the brand guy.
And I remain Professor James.
We barely started season 2 with our podcast, and already we have a lot of great conversations with business and academic leaders. We have identified job readiness, or more specifically, lack of job readiness, as a big effing risk and an even bigger opportunity for employers, students, and universities.
That is so, especially when recent studies said that 65% of Gen Z talent attrits within 12 months of employment. And I'm saying attrits because the study actually used the term quits. And I mean, that number is just too big for me to even say quits. Voluntary turnover at 65%, that'd be mind-blowing. You know, it's expected that Gen Z is going to change jobs 10 times between the ages of 18 and 34.
Wow.
Well, something is not squaring up.
Well, speaking of round holes and square pegs and stuff like that, even though we weren't, but metaphorically, we talk in the university and help students get prepared for the reality of the modern workplace. And, they're familiar with the entry-level job and the expectations, even though some still think they're going to get a signing bonus. But given what we're talking about today, maybe we should add another lesson plan to talk about the exit level job, or what they should plan to do on their first job when it comes time to exit it, if it's really that much of an exodus.
I like the word quit better, Professor James. And when Jeff said quit, all I can think of is that song, too legit to quit. Must be Friday, gang. Must be Friday. Yeah, we have a distinguished guest with us in the studio today. Do us an honor and introduce our guest, please.
Absolutely. It's most definitely my pleasure to introduce PhilDana. Phil is a HR executive. I would call him a serial CHRO with a track record of building high-performing teams within domestic and global companies while creating a great place to work type of environment. His HR superpowers are talent acquisition, people tech, and M&A activities within rapid growth and turnaround environments. As the former HR leader for Dendrian Pharmaceuticals and Ask Biopharmaceutical, Phil led teams through significant transformations, that shifted the HR focus from a foundation of support and compliance to enabling the long-term business strategy by fostering trust and leveraging engagement. Always important, essential even. He creates environments where teammates can bring their whole self and their best selves to work. Before that, Phil served in the Navy as both enlisted and an officer. He's a Naval Academy alumni and continues to serve by supporting transitioning veterans. Phil's a self-proclaimed home chef, I found out, a traveler, a husband and dad, to a Frenchie named Loki, and a pit bull named Cash. Phil, so glad to have you here today. Anything that I left out that's important context for our audience?
Goodness. No, I'm honored. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. It's our pleasure. So, Phil, I've been looking forward to this conversation all week, and it seems like the place to start from your perspective, as chief human resources, chief people, how would you ground our audience in what it means to you today when the term entry-level talent is used?
Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer, believe it or not. From a CHRO perspective, whether it's a small company, big company, global company, or a parent company, you're looking at pretty much an instrument panel of an airplane where there's hundreds of instruments, 6 that matter the most, but the others still tell a tale and you have to pay attention to them. And one of those is university or college talent. So that's probably the easiest answer and what most people think of when you say early talent. Then there's the word early career. So now you're watching the weather, you're listening to reports, you're watching your course over ground and your speed. And so, early career, which could include post-grad. It could include transitioning military. It could include a parent who's now coming on the market. Now that they're able to, they're 26, but this could be their first job. So early career. And then I think the growing population is transitioning career, which is not a formal title that you see out there. I just made that up on the fly, but it's, you've had a side gig. 600,000 people in the U.S. were laid off this last year, and the year's not over. And, a lot of my peers, especially in HR, are transitioning to completely new and different careers based on what's been going on probably since the beginning of COVID. And so maybe they're 40, 50, and they're brand new to a job, a career, brand new to the industry, and they're trying to figure it out. So there's a long answer to something that used to just be said, they're coming out of college or a university. So I think, if we want to focus on that, that's great. But I think the problem with that is, 85% of the companies in the U.S. are probably too small. They don't go to colleges to recruit specific folks out of that university, even though they could be right across the street. But Mike's Body Shop hires 5 people a year, 1 office, 2 or 3 in the garage, and then 1 salesperson, right? And so out of the college across the street, maybe 1 coming straight out of university. But Mike doesn't have time to do that stuff. He's posted on Craigslist. He's not even posted on LinkedIn. And so that's the other conundrum that most of us HR leaders have, is we know there's great talent right across the street. They know we exist because they see us as they drive into the parking lot, but the two just can't connect.
We talk a lot about, Phil, this expectation reality gap. And I think Gen Z gets a bad rap. They had a formative developmental period during COVID and sheltering in place, fundamentally changes your brain. I know I have a younger son, a tiny, who, boy, his confidence was deeply impacted by that whole experience, right? He just recently came back into him, and this was a confident little guy. So glad he's confident again. But my older son, I see him at a totally different developmental stage. So Gen Z in the workforce, this happened to them perhaps during another developmental stage, changes their brains. Plus, they've got the digital native, AI native thing going on, and they're treated differently by society. So they enter the workforce, and in that first job, they churn out. So, is it how we're looking at them? Is it how they're looking at employers? Is it a bit of both? I mean, what's going on?
I think it's a bit of both. One, the market constraints and economic pressures, last in, first out kind of philosophy. If you're a junior level, it impacts the business less. Typically, depends, right? The other is, I really think it's us. It's our problem. It's our hang up, our ages. And the reason why I say that is, when I was at Sears as the diversity guy, traveling the country and making sure that our workforce looked like the communities our stores were in, that used to be the golden rule. Harder now that our community is online and not physical. Retail is dying off quickly, brick and mortar retail. And so I think the shift in mindset really needs to be up to us to own it. But I think the golden rule still applies is, that generation is a huge and growing customer set, and your workforce still needs to look and feel like them. And so to have, I remember when, 10 years ago, I was coming out of Amazon, transitioning to Life Tech. The college students that we were hiring were phenomenal because they grew up with mobile phones, and we on here did not. And so if you can do it on your mobile, even in a workforce, if you can sign paperwork, if you can do day-to-day tasks on your mobile, they had a problem with it, and it really pushed us. And we adopted, and we moved, and now look, it's the amount of work you can do on your mobile phone is phenomenal, and move faster, and do it all while you're drinking a latte at the coffee shop down the street. Now, AI and all the new technologies, man, so I think it's our hang up. And if you're a CEO or an HR leader or just a leader in general, in your hiring, you've really got to keep that in mind. You've got to have a business plan. You've got to have a digital plan. You've got to have a people plan. And you better make sure that some of that is tying in to the youth because, of course, they're our future, obvious.
Yeah,
Hey,
and
Phil, tell us more about that tell us more about it. I want to double click on that before we transition, because that's a very interesting. Our previous guest, we talk about, is well documented job readiness, or the Gen Z, the incoming workforce. They don't know how to operate in a team. They don't know how to communicate effectively, yada, yada. You name the issues, right? A lot of friction there. But I love your point is maybe the issue is us here as Gen X and slightly older. Professor James, he's Gen Alpha. That's a different conversation altogether, but we won't go there today. But talk to us about, how do you ensure that your current workforce, with some baby boomers, some Gen X, some Gen Y, how are we upskilling ourselves? How do we accommodate that, right? Because the Gen Z, it's going to get bigger, and then the Gen Alpha is going to come after that. So how do we ensure that we can work with those folks?
Start by being provocative.
Please.
You see a tremendous amount of stuff on LinkedIn and out there, podcasts, books about hire for culture fit and soft skills. You can train the rest. I say bullshit. You better be hiring for both. And by the way, I could train for culture fit. Remember, I'm former military. They take folks from all over the world, NATO countries, immigrants that transition to being a citizen through the military, downtown Chicago to Canadian border of North Idaho. They put them all together, whether you like it or not. And then within a few months, you're aligned. And so you say, oh, that's only in a military, Phil, or only in a church, or only on a football field in movies. But we did it at Amazon. Jeff Bezos was adamant. Day one, you're Amazonian, period. And we're going to assimilate you. We're going to talk about the 6 original core principles. We're going to live it. We're going to measure it. And we're going to pay variable compensation based on it. So you talk about a way to getting people aligned real fast. And so it can be done. So there's the stage setting. The answer is, in today's, the velocity of business is increasing at a rate that nobody can even put in words or comprehend, especially, watch this new administration, the amount of focus and investment in the sciences. I mean, Vivek, Elon, former President Trump, incoming president, even tried to get Zuckerberg, on the team. So look at all of his picks: space, autonomous, automation, alternate energy, biotech. Those industries are what early career, early talent, transitioning talent folks need to think about in getting their skill set, both soft and hard, ready to be successful. And as managers or leaders that are also, I'm transitioning right now as a CHRO, but luckily I'm on sabbatical. So I'm reading 2 hours a day, taking classes on AI, and keeping up with what industries are going to pop. And so I feel, unfortunately, like if I'm an educational institution, a brick and mortar college, even online platforms, because a lot of those industries that I just listed require hands-on, require cohorts, require case studies, require time under a hood. Luckily, we've got VR and avatar-based training, but I think some institutions are readily adopted, and those that aren't are going to die. I mean, what was it, last 2 years since COVID, 2,000 accredited institutions have closed their doors here in the U.S. I think that's going to accelerate at the same pace, by no coincidence, as the growth of some of these industries.
Phil, it seems like the implication with, your description of the dashboard, which I love, and the 6 factors, is that early talent can be everywhere, right? Not just at universities, looking a whole lot of different ways. So in a market like this, if you can choose as an employer to be anywhere with the talent, how do you make that choice? Where do you go? Who do you want? Do you want the young people who by many accounts are ill prepared for the workplace? So it's going to be more work, even though we both have to adjust to generate the value. Or, do you want the experienced people who are maybe ill prepared for the new tools? What are the trade-offs you see teams having to make in terms of looking at early career, bringing early career in?
Well, I'm 6'3", 300 pounds. Recently did an all-inclusive, one of those really nice, fancy cruises out of Europe. And I can just see the purser looking at me, shaking his head. So the answer is, I want it all. I want to eat it all, and I will. It's just a matter of when, the timing of it, To bring in 2 or 3 companies I was at, just tremendous amount of change, growth, crazy chaos, healthy chaos, business chaos, and popping every other week is just nuts. Would I bring in an intern or a college grad in that environment where the supervisor's like, man, I don't have time to train this person or onboard or assimilate? No, it's not really fair to them. So some of the numbers that I see of, the quit rate, whatever, I could almost put myself in the environment, where everybody's getting laid off. One, not fair. Two, VCs and PEs are pushing companies and leaders to their breaking point. Not a great environment to start a career. This isn't retail or Amazon back in the day where I could start 200 college grads a day and know that they're going to get cared and fed. And half the workforce is remote. And so, I can't look over your shoulder, tell, show, do. Very hard without proper educational platforms and technologies. The tell, show, do model has just been crushed by technology, which is crazy because we need, again, the technology to catch up to allow us to do that. And so until a leader, a manager, a supervisor down in the trenches can onboard somebody that's never done it before, leveraging technology from a remote basis, and can do it in a manner within weeks instead of months, and can do it in a manner that the person actually grasps it, learns it, and can move on. Man, we've got a heck of a road ahead of us.
And so the traditional model of an internship, and again, coming from a college perspective, do you have any general observations about that in today's or the emergent near future in terms of the value that represents for both the one taking the internship and the one, if they have time, to be giving the internship? Or is that model in some way a little bit going by the wayside in effectiveness? And if so, is there something to replace it?
I think the larger companies do a phenomenal job at internships. I was at Intuit, Amazon, LifeTech, now Thermo Fisher, just phenomenal intern programs, like the best ever, period, where they are assigned somebody at the peer level. They're assigned a supervisor who's a natural trainer and leader and developer of people. The curriculum is amazing. They're pre-picked, projects and real hefty work. And there's an intent to convert them, to give them an offer letter at the end of the internship and bring them back, which means I have to know what's happening 2 years later financially and my workforce planning. Good luck in today's world. So larger companies love it. Absolutely. From my experience, 20 years, small, tiny companies, crazy, fast paced, nutty science and tech companies to the bigs, I would stop saying the word. I love co-ops. Like, give me a co-op. If I were to grab all the universities and put them in a room from a CHRO perspective, is, hey, look, you guys aren't doing a good job of teaching them the soft skills, team, working in cohorts, team ability, communication, showing up on time, or your 3 others in the cohort will blast you. That not enough of that type of environment. And then they get thrown in to where, like, you show up late to a meeting, I'm whacking you because I have to whack somebody, and you're the one that just walked in late. The pressure cooker. And then the third piece is internships. Don't coddle them too much. Don't give them a structure that's so different than 2 years later when they come and they're all stoked and they had such an amazing experience and they had all the C-suite taking them out to dinner every other Friday night. And then boom, they show up, they're a research associate, and they don't meet their supervisor for 8 weeks. Like, welcome to the world, kid. So that's kind of the warning shot too, is I think that's why I love co-ops, is they come in, they've got a few more hours than normal, if the company is willing to work around the schedule, and they come in with a little more salt, a little more truth. And I really feel like a lot of that quit rate, I want us unemployment numbers, which we all know are not accurate ever. But I feel like the true quit rate that Charlie spoke to, I think a lot of it is that the culture, the resilience, the lack of scar tissue, the academic environment. Coming from the science space, there's a lot of data and surveys out there show that the most brilliant engineers and neurologists that are working at Duke are scared to death to come out into this, shark infested waters because they're sitting there and they're comfy, and it's very nice environment. And so I feel like there's both need to do something to connect in the middle, and what we grew up on is not the answer.
Thank you.
Sounds
Phil.
like there are gaps. Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
Charlie. Pardon me.
So our podcast, we talk a lot about college talent. I mean, and as of late, we're trying to be more inclusive by saying early career, because we've heard that often when we talk to a lot of HR folks. But tell me something I don't know there. I mean, tell the audience, because a lot of us we're probably not as non-HR, non-talent acquisition expert. There's a lot that we need to unpack. So tell me something I don't know around college talent.
I don't know, Charlie. You're an impressive guy, and you're in a role and have a bio where it's your job to know better than me. So please forgive my humility as I try desperately to give you an answer that you wouldn't know. Probably not. I'll just be Captain Obvious. I think the onus goes back to the formative years. I think, the college grads, it's too late. My daughter's about to turn 19. She was smarter than me, more capable than I was when she was 12 than when I was 16, 17, like easily 4 or 5 years, right? Man, thinking back to what I was like at 10, 11, and 12, reading textbooks that were 20 years old and what the focus was back then. And I think the gap has been closed, but the problem is we have to react to it as an employer. I think the best companies aren't only thinking internships, co-ops, grads, post-grad, trying to get into the classrooms through advisory and sponsorship. And, it takes 3 years from a new technology to the best schools in the country, in the world, to get it into the curriculum. 3 years. So think about that. Think about CRISPR. Think about Neuralink and all these, the renewable energy world. Like, holy cow. In 3 years, how much has popped and how fast things move. I think high schools and middle schools are absolutely critical. And somehow we have to change our mindset and game to get in and have influence, because, those are the formative years. I think kids are making career decisions in 7th and 8th grade somewhat, especially girls. I think girls are earlier than boys in making a decision of whether they want to be a Barbie or an astronaut. And I think we don't even talk about them until they're done with university. And I just think it's too late. So. Yep.
Phil, I want to be provocative for a second here. And certainly there's something that we continue to hear from a CHRO point of view. The last few years, we've seen major emphasis on DEI, right? Oftentimes championed by the very top in the HR organization, and then as of late, we're seeing the DEI is going away, from Walmart to Ford and so on and so forth. What is your take on why that is? Well, because I think sincerely, we all appreciate diversity. I love
that I'm getting that question asked. One, my military background, I feel like military did it best first. It was called TQL and they rolled it out in 1990. I was enlisted. I remember it was inculcated in everything we did. There was no TQL officer. There was no one class on unbiased, unconscious bias. There was no class.
Wait, what's TQL? What's TQL, by the way?
Quality leadership.
Okay.
And just in that title is my point, is I feel like companies reacted. They went and hired a DEI person. And I was that person for Sears Holdings in Chicago. Look at me. And I think I was the perfect one, because I was a super ally coming out of the military. I saw, felt, and lived really what it should be. It's a leadership issue. It's not hire a DEI person. Good, we've got it covered. It's not go down a checklist. It's not start a bunch of employee resource groups. It's not change your logo into a rainbow flag and post it on LinkedIn. None of that stuff matters to the board or the shareholders or the patients or the customers, really. Maybe customers. You can influence customers. I'll give you that. But the reality is, if it, you can do everything. And if you can't walk in the room as a leader and say, how has this impacted our shareholder value, our sales, or our patient or customer impact, if you can't answer that, which means it's a leadership issue. And if you're not measuring it and putting variable comp attached to it, it's all bullshit.
Wow.
So,
Well, Phil, that last term I'm not familiar with. Is that a technical term in the world of the CHRO?
What's the
I think
BS?
it's,
Yeah.
do you, um, if a member of our audience wanted to really learn more about the world of the CHRO, because, a lot of our folks aren't really, our audience are not in that world directly, at least at the level that you are. What would you recommend for them to view or read or go to learn more about uh, this exciting career that, has had you in its grasp for some time now?
Yeah, I think every industry and every job or function department within a company has kind of the same. There's a big parent organization in HR at SHRM out of Washington D.C. They're the keeper of the treasure chest of all the policies, laws, and everything, and they have a certification process and classes and tests, and you have to go to so many things in a year, just like a teacher or a doctor. So most industries have that. So SHRM is it. Then there's a local, so if you're living in Raleigh, my area, you're going to the Raleigh SHRM chapter events where you're meeting others, finding mentors, you're finding peers to hang out with, you're networking within your space. And then, there's thought leaders that are out there that you follow on LinkedIn and you read their content and you get smart. There's Disrupt HR. There's thought leaders like Josh Bersin, Lars Schmidt. There's just a ton of really phenomenal HR leaders that figured it out, and now they're giving back. So follow those people. That's what I'm doing now. I'm a fairly new CHRO. I've only had 2 number 1 gigs for a total of 3.5 years. So I still follow, and that's also the key is, we all have to do it. We all have to do the same things. It's not really just a new college grad that needs to get out there and read and learn and network and find mentors. I'm 52 and I'm still doing it at a feverish rate right now. So
52 going 25, Phil. That's what I think. Hey, I'm dying to ask you this question, Phil. And I've seen this a lot. Some folks holding the number 1 position in the company, they have a CHRO title. And then they come across others with a chief people officer.
yeah.
Is there a difference, or is that basically, the same scenario as adding the B to DEI? It's like, is that more just changing the letters here, or?
Yeah, there is. And it varies based on who you ask, and it varies by the size of the company. As you know, just like IT and finance, HR starts as an army of one, and they have to be able to do it all. Payroll, write the handbook, do investigation, recruit everything. You got 30, 40 employees, and they're hustling in all of it, but they're probably not a specialist in one of the 38 areas of HR. And so, and then you get larger companies, 1,000, where you probably have a head of recruiting, a head of total rewards, which is compensation, benefits. The systems, we all have IT systems now, and it's usually owned by the HR leader and not the IT leader. And some of us also own payroll, and some of us are working with the board if it's publicly traded on the shares and the issuance of those shares, pay raises, performance management, all that. The bigger you get, and so chief people officer is usually all the HR core has been built, and maybe there was a director or VP of HR, and they're probably heavy generalists. And as you get bigger and more strategic, and now you need an HR plan for the 14, acquisitions you're going to do and all this other stuff, the people ops came about with this tremendous growth around culture, engagement. In my bio, I said trust plus engagement equals results. That's the foundation of Great Place to Work certification. And so it's really the evolution from, I don't mean this in a bad way, but being kind of a back office, make the train run, to the new HR leader could be the successor to the CEO. And so CHRO is typically, you've got the HR function. A CPO is right next to the CEO talking business future. And they probably own other things like comms, facilities, maybe other functions. My last one, I had 6 functions. So it's probably more of a CPO than a CHRO.
I haven't heard any of that new term in what you just described. So it sounds like you've been able to avoid a lot of that technical term that we mentioned earlier in your recent experience. So congratulations to you.
No, Professor James, not at all. Knee deep with hip waiters, but I grew up on a farm. So Yeah, the CHRO is the one that's in it the most. So the CEO doesn't have to be, and God help us if the CFO ever gets in it, like his or her shoes need to be pristine, but CHRO needs to be in hip waders to get through.
Now,
Yes.
there's some advice we can live with and learn from. Thank you very much, Phil.
Phil, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us today. And certainly you made all of us smarter. I mean, I'm just there's so many more. I love to learn more about the human resources, human capital management, development, and certainly would love to have you come back in the near future here to talk to us more about that. So on behalf of the Job Ready podcast, this is Charlie, the entrepreneur.
This is Jeff, the brand guy.
And I am Professor James.
Yeah, big gratitude and respect to all of you listening. JobReady is an employer-funded financial aid podcast. You can visit us on the EFFA site at effa.io/JobReady, all one word. EFFA helps employers source, vet, and prepare university talent.
That's it, folks. We are effing over and out.